Okay, so now we're going to go Section 3, Chapter 17. So I'm in Cengage already, so we'll click Section 3 and scroll down to Chapter 17. And then remember, we click on Homework, and then we do the counts for grade, and we'll go into the problems and applications. So as usual, we only have 2 questions, but there's always more to the 2 questions than it always appears. So we'll get going. All right, so question number 1 is, it doesn't actually look too long and cumbersome, but there's actually quite a lot to this question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the Word document and go over a few things. So in the first part of this question, you're given the market demand curve in a table form. So remember, market demand is just, at some price, what's the quantity being demanded. So at these different price levels, the quantity demanded will be different. And then you're informed in the question that there are many suppliers or firms of diamonds, and you're asked to determine what would be the price and the quantity sold. And you're given information that the marginal cost is $2,000. It's constant at all levels of output. So in essence, you're going to assume that the supply curve, which is the marginal cost curve, is a straight horizontal line. So you're going to find the place where your marginal revenue is equal to your marginal cost at a level of $2,000. So here's your demand curve right here, and so I think you should be able to find where that would be. And then moving on. So you're then told, given the same information, marginal cost still $2,000, but now you want to think of this as a monopoly, the market. So rather than this being a perfectly competitive type of industry where the demand and marginal revenue curves are one and the same, in this case, they're not. And so your demand curve, which again is represented here with the price and quantity, is not going to be the same as your marginal revenue curve for monopoly. But the place at which firms determine where to produce and then price accordingly is always where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So in order to come up with that answer, you actually have to do a couple things. So the first thing you need to do is find out what marginal revenue is, because marginal cost we already know. We were told it's 2,000. But to get marginal revenue, you have to go one step prior, which is you've got to find what total revenue is and then take that and get the marginal revenue, which is your change in total revenue over the change in quantity. So what I'm showing you here in this table is you need to add in 2 extra columns in order to figure out total revenue, and then you need to then figure out your marginal revenue. And as a reminder, as I just said, we got to find where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. That's the optimum place to go. But sometimes it can happen, you won't have a place where it's exactly where marginal revenue and marginal cost are one and the same thing. So if you look at your marginal revenue column, there's actually no marginal revenue of 2,000. There's these different levels, and then there's some that are negative, which we know we'd never want to, go to where we're getting a negative revenue. And the other thing we also know is you actually don't want to have a less than $2,000 marginal revenue if the cost to produce the good of that last good is 2,000. You've got to at least get 2,000 or more. So with that in mind, and you want to think about where the monopoly would produce. So again, the rule is marginal revenue equals marginal cost. But if you can't find that exact place where they're equal, then you've got to make sure that wherever they go, they're getting at least the amount of revenue that it costs them. And then the next part of this question is you're now told that the 2 countries that are given in this particular question now form a cartel. And what that means is a cartel just is where countries come together and they in essence form a monopoly. So this question is really the same question as the one you just answered. Where will you produce and price if you're a monopoly? Because that's what a cartel is. Then you're asked how much profit for each of the two countries will be, because in the question there's two countries. So what you're going to do, you've already kind of got the information. You have your total revenue. We know our marginal revenue. We know where we're going to be producing. But now we need to figure out our costs and then our profits, because that's what the question's asking. So at first you might think like, well, I don't have any costs, but you actually do. Because at the very beginning of this question, you were told that the marginal cost for every single unit this firm produces, which again is unusual, but in this case, the question is saying it's identical. It's the same. It doesn't change. So every time they produce a unit, it costs them $2,000. So from that information, we are actually able to figure out a total cost column. And so I did a couple examples. So like at this quantity of 2,000 units, if each one costs us $2,000 to produce, we would take the $2,000 each one costs us, times it by however many numbers, we have, which is 2,000. The cost would be $4 million. So if we take revenue minus cost, we would then be able to find the profit. So I don't think you should have trouble answering that part of the question. And then moving on down, you're then told that South Africa starts to, and you can kind of think of it, cheat. So they decide they're going to increase their production by 1,000 units. So technically the best place to be is where the total amount being produced is 4,000. So each country would produce 2,000 apiece. But South Africa decides, oh, we're going to produce another 1,000 units. So that would mean that they would be now producing 3,000 while Russia would still keep producing 2,000. So what you're being asked in this question is what's going to happen. So now you're going to be using the quantity of 5,000 to figure out all your information. And then the very last part of the question is kind of a continuation of this idea that cartels, or when companies, firms kind of join forces together to set price and output, it ultimately, inevitably, has always ended in somebody ends up cheating. And that's the reason most economists believe cartels in long run will not last. And I hope that helps.